This program is brought to you by the James S. Holloway Foundation, supporting business development through a combination of international outreach and community initiatives, and the Ted and Ann Warner
James and
Foundation,
Ann
innovating community.
Alfred
and listeners that are like you. You're welcome. Welcome to Homestead Moments with Ben Balmer. Where the sky is blue, the doors are unlocked, and the house soup is always minestrone. The day ended not as most did, with a shimmer, but with a thud. I remember Dill Eastman and I, sitting on the edge of his roof, our legs swinging off the end, feeling the shingles beneath us. We watched the sun set over the eastern seaboard, staring off into the distance, tracing the line of the horizon with our eyes. My mind was drawn back that evening, back to the day when Dill and I hatched a plan to steal Miss Jenkins' subtraction test from her office, copy down the answers and use them on it. The plan went off without a hitch, but I remember the next day being called into her office. Dill had turned us in. I didn't get it at the time. I didn't understand why he would do something like that. I got so mad at him later that day, I raised my voice, shouting, Why would you do that? Why would you ruin it like that? And he looked at me and he said, I just felt so terrible, I had to. I felt this churning deep within my gut. In that moment, I realized that I had never felt that churning in my gut. I had never felt guilty. Today on Homestead Memories, we're going to be talking about remorse. When we feel it, when we don't, and when we wish we did. Maureen Morrison was standing in a field. Grain all around, on every side, stretching off into the distance. Just on the edge of the horizon, you could barely see a farmhouse, the wood warped and contorted by years of use. She walked slowly towards it, her feet falling lightly on the ground, pushing against the grain. When she reached the door, she opened it and looked inside. A rhubarb pie sat on the kitchen counter. All of the angles of the room seemed to twist into it as if it were a vanishing point. She reached for it, and then everything dissolved into gray and ashes. Maureen awoke with a start in her house, feeling as if she had been run over by a Zamboni. She slowly crawled out of bed and went out onto the porch, staring out at the fields. 30 acres of cabbage. The neighbors called it the saddest 30 acres in the Midwest. Every harvest season, she and her husband would drive the machinery through the fields with a vague aura of distaste, hating every second of it, but not knowing it yet. She couldn't find her husband, though. She searched the house, the fields. He was nowhere to be found that morning. Her chest began to fill with panic, and not knowing what to do, she put a pot of water on the stove and watched as it boiled. This was oddly comforting to her. I awoke that morning to a knock on my door. I opened it up and it was Dill Eastman standing there with wide eyes. Dill, I said, what brings you to my house this morning? I thought you were having dental surgery. He replied. Excuse me? He spat out 3 of his teeth on the floor and then opened his mouth for a normal answer. I'm in dire need of assistance, he said. My dad gave me his gold wristwatch, the one he got for a wedding gift. And while we were walking in the woods yesterday, I think I lost it or dropped it or something. He seemed to be quite flustered, so I agreed to go to the woods with him that day and look for it. You could tell instantly by the darkening of the sky around it that the seedy motel was the home of Frank Winsome, private investigator. He sat in a torn-up room, seeing the wrongs of his past reflected back at him, repeated over and over again in the pastel wallpaper. "God besmirch the earth that hold ye," he said at his glass of gin, not really knowing what that meant, but saying it anyways. He heard something at that moment, but he couldn't tell if it was the ringing of a phone or the ringing in his ears. He eventually realized it was both, and he picked up the phone. Dill and I almost pranced through the woods, still searching but having fun all the way. It was in those murky woods that I learned Dill's middle name for the first time. It sounded like Sylvester, but more mournful, more intense. We burst out into a bright sunny clearing, and Dill turned to me with a frightened look in his eyes. He said, "If I don't find this, my dad's going to be so mad at me. I don't think he'll ever forgive me. I'm just filled with guilt." At least he had a dad to be mad at him. A moment after that, I tripped and fell into the clearing, and a gold watch slipped out of my pocket. Frank Winsome pulled up to Maureen's house, briskly ascending the walk and stepping into the living room. "I would compliment you on your cabbage fields, ma'am, but cabbage is for the emotionally weak, and I have a case to solve." He immediately set about the house, looking for clues in the disappearance of her husband. He was shocked, though, when, on the mantelpiece, he came across a photo of her husband and himself. He remembered who James Morrison was, and his eyes glazed over. "What's wrong?" she asked him. "The bus, the orphans, the hard right turn, Moscow, 1963. I'll never forgive myself for what I did." He softly sobbed as she cradled him in her arms until the sun rose. Dill looked at me with a combined mixture of shock and awe and betrayal. "What?" he said at me. How do you have his watch?" In all honesty, I didn't know why I stole it. Just because I could? I don't know. "Listen, Dill, I can explain this. There's a perfectly reasonable explanation." "No," he said. You liar, you... And it's always like this, isn't it? You take, and you take, and you take, and you claim all these people are your friends and that you care about them, but you just take everything they have." "Dill, think this through. You're not being reasonable," I said. Before I knew it, he had lunged towards me. We tussled on the ground, rolling back and forth, fists and words flying. Before I knew it, though, I had positioned myself on top of him, hands at his throat. I held his life in my hands. I was watching it fade away beneath me when suddenly, I didn't know why, I let go. I let him live. He got up from the ground and looked at me. He said, "You're a sick man. You know what? I don't even want it. Take it." He threw the watch on the ground and ran off into the distance. I picked the watch up and walked home. People never like to feel bad about things. Whenever we apologize, we do it like we're wishing away the remorse. But you never realize how scary it would be to not feel a thing. I climbed up on the roof next to Dill Eastman that night. There were many moments of silence, our legs swinging. "Why didn't you kill me?" he said. "Please tell me it was because you felt that churning in your gut. Please tell me you felt guilty." I'm so sorry, Dill," I said. "I'm so sorry." He hopped down from the roof, and looking back up at me, he said, "Please tell me you felt something." that you felt anything at all. I looked up at the stars, so I wouldn't have to look back into Dill's eyes. Homestead Memories is written, directed, recorded, and edited by Ben Balmer. Special thanks to Michael Frim for listening through all these episodes to make sure I don't go on any profanity-laden rants on live radio. The show is produced and broadcasted by Wildcat Radio. Events and stories in Homestead Memories may be based slightly on real emotions, but are largely fictional and comedic. I am okay. I promise.